Scene 3. Shredder's Hideout. Cool. Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles The Hyperstone Heist. In the last part we started off the game and now we're in Stage 3. And I actually want to remedy something a little bit that I've been saying for a while now. I've called Turtles in Time TMNT4 a lot, but it's only TMNT4 for consoles. It's technically only the second arcade game. So if you want to play console adaptations of the arcade games exclusively, you're going straight to TMNT2 and then to 4, and that's it. Kind of weird how things happen like that here and there. It's not the only series that's had stuff like that happen with its numbering, but I do find it kind of interesting at the same time because you really wouldn't see that happen nowadays. Usually if a game is released in arcades and it comes to console, it'll always be the same number. Usually because at that point it's fighting games, and fighting games are a lot more consistent about how they number themselves. Compare that to, say, Mario Kart, for instance, where it wasn't really numbered until the 3DS one, and even then the 3DS one is arguably misnumbered. So, notably, the game doesn't have a lot of cut content that we're aware of, but there are two cheat codes I want to bring up at this point. There's one that's in every version, and then there's one that's not. The one that's in every version is stage select. On the title screen you press A, B, B, C, 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 B, A, and then when you start the game the level select shows up and allows you to select between the stage and the sub-stage areas. So in the case you want to skip level 1 and the surfing section of level 2, you can go to stage 2, area 2. But the really interesting cheat code is interesting because if it's an option at all, it's always on by default in a lot of beat-em-ups. In the Japanese and European versions exclusively, it's not in the US version. At the Konami logo, if you press C, B, B, A, 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 B, C, you enable friendly fire in the two-player mode, so you can actively attack your second player. Which I guess makes potentially greeting for kill counts a little bit more interesting, but overall it'll just kind of make for a harder experience. But it's kind of natural for beat-em-ups to have that on by default in my eyes, because like Streets of Rage has that on by default. I want to say some of the Final Fights do. Scott Pilgrim doesn't, but Scott Pilgrim technically has it if you throw enemies and weapons, I think. Either way, a bit weird that it's a cheat code here to begin with. If it's an option at all, it's always on in most games, so it just kind of stands out for that. Stage 3, though, doesn't have a lot of unique stuff to it besides introducing these kind of off-pink foot soldiers, which act more as one-off hazards. They walk on screen, breathe fire, and then leave. That's about it. The latter half of it, I'd say, is where there's any kind of real hazards you have to worry about. And hey, look, we're not even 3 minutes in, and there's a health recovery again. And here we are, 3 minutes in, and there's already another healing item. TMNT3 is just weirdly strict with those looking back, and I thought TMNT2 was as well, but I went back and looked at my LP a little bit from, I think that was like 3 years ago now by the time this gets uploaded-ish. And there was more in that game than I remember there being. So, whoops. Turns out if you don't revisit a game a lot, you tend to forget what happens in it. I remembered the base level structures, and I remember not being able to do nearly as much as you could in TMNT3, and those are true. But minute details like that aren't going to stick with me as much. Ooh, and here we got the first appearance of the Mousers. The Mousers are weirdly annoying in Hyperstone Heist and Turtles in Time, as while they go down in one shot and they kind of huddle themselves in such a way that it's very easy to jump kick into them especially, they can very easily hit you out of your jumps and grab onto you when you're on the ground if there's a lot of them around you, so try to take them out quickly. Now, something I'm only now realizing, I think this is the only level in the game that's wholly original to Hyperstone Heist. Most of the other levels in the game, in some form, are derived from the arcade game /TMNT2 or Turtles in Time /TMNT4. For instance, level 1's sewer and street graphics for New York City were based off of sewer surfing, and I can never remember the name of the second stage from TMNT4, but it's that. Whereas the previous stage was based off of the surfing stage from TMNT4 / part of TMNT2, I believe. The start at TMNT3, 3's second stage. And then once you're on the boat, it's just straight at the pirate level from TMNT4. And when you're in the cave, that's part of the prehistoric era stage, I think, from TMNT4. The next stage is wholly based off that same aesthetic. And the final stage is the same thing as a part of the endgame of TMNT4 /TMNT2. So, credit to this one, I guess, for being original. And it's around here you need to be careful because we start having some hazards. These bamboo shoots act as spikes that just make those parts of the stage completely inaccessible to be stood on for too long. And a moment ago, you might have noticed there were some weird things on the top of the screen. Those were spike ceilings, and if you jumped, you would get hit and suffer some pretty massive knockback. I think easily the worst feeling thing about this game in Turtles in Time is if you take a strong enough hit, you just get knocked back and are unable to move for a while. And usually right when you get back up, sometimes you get some invincibility frames, but usually you're just open to attack immediately, and that's where mousers can especially be super annoying, so be careful of that. Also, like TMNT 3, as well as Turtles in Time, and I want to say TMNT 2, be careful of foot soldiers being behind you, because they can just grab onto you and drain your health or leave you open to being smacked in the face by other foot soldiers. And it's really around now you're going to see them doing what I talked about last part with the Tonfa foot soldiers, where they'll start throwing them in with either, like, 3 of themselves and 1 variety of another foot soldier, or 2 and 2, just to try and have you deal with them by using the other foot soldiers, so use that to your advantage. Again, you could also just hit into them with either the final hit of your combo, or by using stage hazard / dash attacks. You have plenty of combo options in the 16-bit Turtles games. To the point where they even made one of them a fighting game. Although that was technically also on 8-bit, that was on the NES. It's an alright fighting game, overall. I think there are better licensed fighting games at the time, but it's better than some of the ones we got in the mid-2000s. We're kind of in a weird era now, though, for, like, licensed games, where they started putting a lot of effort into them because they started being such failures for a while there that they actually had to put effort into them to make them any kind of profitable. In the case they decided to make them. Like, we used to get games for, like, every nerd culture-focused movie, like, I think the original Iron Man got a game, a lot of the Transformers movies got games in some form. Whereas nowadays, the only ones that really get games nowadays... Whereas nowadays, the only movies that really get games are usually, like, large movie franchises getting a Lego parody, or a story developer being able to work with another IP to just develop a weird spin-off. Like, Platinum Games making those licensed games in the early 2010s, early to mid-2010s, like, the Turtles game actually they made, the Korra game, Transformers, things like that. Usually smaller, much rarer projects at the end of the day. But now it's time for the boss. You must defeat my foot soldiers before you fight me. And I think his only game appearance, and only appearance outside of the live-action movies until I think the 2012 series, we got Tatsu here, Shredder's right-hand man. He's also straight up lying in his dialogue. Tatsu's main attack is to spawn 3 standard foot soldiers at a time, and while they're out, he'll be at either edge of the screen throwing some, I guess they're meant to be like darts at you. If you hit him and do a combo on him, he will jump to the other side and fire some darts downwards in the process, so you shouldn't chase him immediately. Whenever you defeat all 3 of the Foot Clan soldiers he's spawned, he spawns 3 more. So, you kind of just need to leave like 1 alive and go after him and just chase him down, back and forth. It's kind of a weird boss fight, but at least it's relatively straightforward. I always did find Tatsu kind of a cool character in the 2 live-action movies he was in, because I don't think he was in the 3rd one whatsoever. And I'm really glad they eventually brought him into the cartoons, but here he's not much to write home about. Master! Now you see, the mutants I can understand exploding maybe because of mutagen. Why did he just explode? Okay. But that's stage 3. Not a lot to write home about. Scene 4 of the Gauntlet, though, can be, because this stage is very, very weird. Because what is in it, I would usually put in the final stage of a beat-em-up, but I guess a lot of them do also put it in the penultimate stages. First off, we got some of the pizza monsters here returning from stage 1. But these are more or less here just to whittle down your health. I actually would recommend avoiding them more than actually fighting them. Because the main thing about Stage 4, the reason it's called the Gauntlet, is you're refighting all 3 of the prior bosses. You're doing Leatherhead into Rocksteady into Tatsu again before fighting this stage's actual boss. All on 1 health bar, and I think you have to do it all on 1 continue. So if you game over, you have to do them all over again. Is it hard? entirely. Again, the bosses I find are overall the easiest part of this game, because especially Leatherhead and Rocksteady fall victim to 1, 2, 3, 4 combo spreads before you just escape and then go in for more damage. It's just more of a time sink, and you probably want to save as many lives as you can for the boss at the actual end of the stage. Loosely, because it's not that bad of a boss fight overall. It's just kind of a weird choice for this game, I feel, considering it's overall still a relatively short game, even for a beat-em-up. So just having a very short 4th stage that's a boss rush is very weird. Something I find a little weird about this entire stage, too, is that it would have been a prime place to put Bebop. Just make the second fight against Rocksteady and Bebop, because otherwise, Bebop's completely absent from the game. Just feels kind of weird to have Rocksteady without his and Bebop, you know what I mean? Kind of do what Mega Man 02 did with that boss fight in the boss rush, where they're like, okay, you're not only fighting the guy you fought in this game, you're fighting his brother who you fought in the last game as well, which, real weird that game did that, but it was cool at the same time, because you had a real cool way to finish that fight. Missed opportunities, I guess, but I guess at the same time they're also probably... I was about to say competing with cartridge sizes, but actually now I'm curious. Genesis cartridge size. It couldn't have been that different from the Super Nintendo, right? 4 megabyte. SNES cartridge size. 6 megabytes. And that's probably the smallest version, because RPGs probably had to have a bit more storage space. So, it could be a cartridge space thing, maybe, but I really doubt that adding one boss and its attacks would have increased the size that much, right? Either way, the boss rush is almost done, and the boss fight at the end of the stage starts almost immediately afterwards. And I want to say they give you a health restorative, so they're at least kind in that regard. I would have liked one between every boss, but I feel I'd be a little too generous at the end of the day. The biggest threat, honestly, during the Tatsu fight is one of the foot soldiers grabbing you so he can just throw his darts at you. Here's the boss. My mousers will stop you. A completely unique boss fight like Tatsu to Turtles in Time is untransformed human Baxter Stockman. And it's not much to write home about, honestly. He just circles around in an infinity loop around the center of the screen while spawning upwards of 6 masters at a time, which are the big threat here. However, since he's flying, you actively have to use your jump attacks against him, which I think are natively weaker than even the first hit in your combo. So he can take quite a few blows, but you take out his main attack by attacking him probably completely accidentally. So it's not much to write home about. If you can hit him from a standstill, I'm just not aware of it. And if you can rather, I guess tell me. I would like to make this fight a little more efficient, but it's also not a very hard fight. I'd say the refight against Rocksteady in Tatsu particularly is probably where you're going to lose more of your lives here. If there is one piece of advice I have, though, if you're running low on lives, and are maybe on your last continue by this point for some reason, I guess if you chose less lives to begin with and lesser continues, you can use this fight to farm for them, because since the mousers go down in one hit and they always count for 1 point on the kill count up there on the top left, you can just farm them over and over again as long as you try to leave Stockman alone. Hell, there I go, getting one right now. Is it recommended? Probably not, but again, as you can see, you can also just kind of pile on the shots to Stockman pretty quickly if you're real good about jumping immediately after you land a hit. This fight and stage, not a lot to write home about, honestly, kind of uninteresting at the end of the day, but at least we get to see a human Baxter Stockman, which is unusual for these kind of games. My dear mousers have been beaten! No! Oh god, oh my, you see now that explosion at least makes sense. He was in a machine, I just killed a man. Oh god. Dead end! But the detector indicates that he's close by. Welcome, puny turtles. Fools, feel the wrath of the Hyperstone. Hey dudes, let's go! Oh boy. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 3, we're ending off the game. See you guys then.